What I like about your style of fishing, Darryl, is it's quite simple and straightforward, and nowadays everyone seems to be faffing around with spods and bits of plastic and bags and all kinds of things, whereas you're sort of straight down the line, aren't you? And this carrier bag and what have you pretty much sums up you and bait, doesn't it?
Yeah, boilies and sometimes boilies. Like.
So you've got an easy stick, a catapult and some boilies, and you'd be happy to take that anywhere.
Yeah, it suits the sort of fishing I do, that I'm generally looking to move on whatever's going on, and spotting a marker floating doesn't always go well with what I'm doing. So I tend to stick with boilies. Obviously I will try other things, but this is my first port of call when I'm going to a new venue. Right.
When you say that spodding and marker floating don't sort of fit in with what you're doing, what do you mean by that exactly?
Well, I'm tending to turn up at a lake and look to find the fish straight away, and rather than scare them off by marker floating and spodding, I'm looking for a quick bite instantly by putting one lead out there, maybe a couple of leads, and keeping everything down to disturbance down to a minimum.
Right, okay. So these are activate boilies, aren't
They are.
18 mil?
Yeah.
So when you turn up, I mean, I suppose it's venue dependent and how many fish you've got to go at, but most guys, I think, watching this, and myself included, a lot of people fish boilies and we fish one out the bag on a standard bottom bait rig, which is pretty much what you do, and we'll look at your rigs later. But your approach obviously must be a little bit different because you catch a lot more fish than most. So if you say, for example, most guys are turning up, they're putting out a marker float, something you don't do, and they're firing 50 baits around it and putting it on the alarm, would you put in 50 baits? Would you put them in a tightish area? I mean, try and tell us a bit more about how you're approaching this swim, for example, and how you're putting the bait in and why you're doing it.
I don't tend to bait up too tight for a start. I tend to scatter my bait around because I'm trying to intercept groups of fish on a lake like this with a number of fish in.
Right.
I'm looking at my hook bait's obviously on the spot where I want the fish, but I want my bait on the spot, around the spot, in the area to hopefully, if they pick up one, then they'll carry on searching in that area, and hopefully as they home in on the area, they'll come across my hook bait.
Right, okay. And do you think that's an advantage on a venue like this? And I know you said earlier you did well on a car park lake, which is like this venue, uses bait boats a lot. So do you think your approach, pike are still crashing into the fry down there, do you think that your approach of spreading it when people are using bait boats is an advantage as well?
If people are using bait boats, and a pile of bait in a concentrated area is a devastating method that will work instantly, but once it's been done to any degree, then it becomes dangerous to the fish and they associate it with trouble. So I tend to scatter my bait out, so there is no trap as such. Boilies get fired out, misfired out into the lake, and a lesser concentration is less scary for them, I think.
Right, yeah, okay. So you just want them to come across one and then maybe another one. And,
yeah, and it helps with the hooking and that as they come in. If they're not concentrated feeding on one spot, if they're moving around as well while they're picking up the baits, I think that does help.
Right, so you want them to come down, pick up the bait and then move to the next one, and that's going to give you a better hook hold than if they're feeding tight on one spot. So do you ever put on stringers or anything like that?
I have done at times, but because I'm fishing like semi-buoyant hook baits, I don't want the stringer to pull it all down tight together. I want it to, as I'm feeling the lead down, I want the bait to land as far away from the lead as possible. Right. To be as natural as possible.
Well, you mentioned your pop-ups or your hook baits, Darryl. These are a bit different, aren't they? What can you tell us about these?
I've rolled them myself. They're same flavour, same mix as the freebies, but you might notice they're a different colour. I've added quite a lot of white bait dye, more than probably normally would in a bait, but that's just that gives it a washed out look, and also it's more of a visual thing. So if I've got a lot of freebies out there, hopefully the visual factor will draw them to my hook bait quicker.
So you're doing really the opposite of what everybody else does. Everyone tries to draw attention to their hook bait by making it bright or smelly. You're making it look old and stand out at the same time.
Yeah, also as well, it smells exactly the same as my freebies, and it is the same bait. It's not a pop-up that's just had artificial flavour added to it, and it is the same as my freebies, so even in the dark when they can see nothing, it is still the same.
That's a key point, right. And you've made these so that they sink slowly, or? On
their own, if you threw that in the lake, it would float, but with the weight of the hook, it sinks. So what I'm looking for is when the fish picks it up, it catches it off guard, and it will be further down its mouth than what it anticipated it.
Right, yeah, okay, because it's so much lighter. Well, that whole sort of boilie approach, you know, for open water and so on, I can see that working well. They're 18 mil boilies. Let's say, for example, you wanted to fish under the bush. Do you do things the same?
I may cram a few baits up and throw it around just because I can at that range, but I would still fish a whole boilie on the hook. I might like nick a few bits off the side if I felt like it, but I would fish them straight out of the bag like that as well.
Right, okay. So take it anywhere, a good boilie, like the Activate. Just briefly, the colour of them. I mean, do you think that's, do you like dark coloured baits?
Yeah, I do, just for the bird life factor. I want the fish to eat them and not the birds, and the dark colour of like all quality food baits tend to be dark coloured, and I tend to fish baits like that myself.
That's interesting with the birds. I noticed last night you were having a real mare, weren't you?
Yeah, seagulls they just weren't happening. Like we have to wait until just on dark when they can't see them in the water.
So you'll put, I mean, usually on a lot of lakes these days, you pick these up. These used to be bright yellow, didn't they?
Yeah, orange.
Yeah, and they would come straight away. But so you'll use this sort of on dark and put your bait out, and it's harder for the birds to get.